Good morning. You're listening to Melanie in the Morning, and I'm your host, Melanie Bell. And I talk to ordinary people with extraordinary stories because everyone's interesting if you just listen. In 1998, Jamie Sloan, at age 27, found herself in transition. She wanted to experience life beyond the idea of the illusionary American dream. Driven by passions and guided by faith, she boarded a plane with an around-the-world ticket for about $300 in her pocket. Her experiences in Australia, Nepal, Greece, and Ireland gave her insights and taught her universal truths to guide her life. I'll be talking with Jamie today, not only about her personal journey and why she needed to write this book and how she wrote the book. So, Jamie, you wrote a book, published it, and you're about to share it with the world. How do you feel?
Nervous. Very, very nervous, actually.
It seems a little bit like having a baby.
It is very much like having a baby, and there's always that time in a parent's life where they, have to step back and allow the child to do their thing. And I myself have come to that part of this whole process where now, it's hands off. Mm-hmm. It just was released to the world on this past Monday, or a week from today, and now I get to sit back and see what happens.
Right.
And it's nerve-wracking.
I can only imagine. I mean, you are putting yourself out there to the world. This is a piece of art that you created, and you have no idea how people are going to react to it.
Right, and the world's full of critics.
Right. And I'm guessing that you might be one of them.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, On the Road to Find Out, why don't you tell me a little bit about what that means, why you named it that, what's going on with that?
Sure. On the Road to Find Out is actually a Cat Stevens song, and that's pretty much where it began. I was listening to some Cat Stevens while packing for the trip, and when I was listening to the song half-heartedly and hearing the words, I was like, wow, this is pretty applicable to what's about to happen. And as the adventure happened and just life in general just became an extraordinary thing that never before had I thought of life in the ways that I did while abroad. And there were so many experiences that happened where by the end of it, it was sharing some stories. It was just brought to my attention, you should write a book. And I had so many stories that I just thought I really should. And that was 15 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, it took you 14 years to write the book.
Yeah, and it was a maddening process, like literally maddening. Mm-hmm. There were days there were nights I couldn't sleep. It was just, for probably the first 10 years, I'd started and I'd stop. I'd start and I'd stop, and I'd start and I'd stop. I just couldn't get it in a form, and I didn't know where to begin.
Was it just like swirling ideas?
So many, and I had pieces of paper everywhere. It was kind of like what's that artist Pollock?
Oh, right.
It was like that. I just had these pieces of paper with ideas and concepts and things that I just had to conform into one literary work. And so, yeah, there was a lot to draw from, but putting it all together was an entirely different story and quite a process.
And before, you had no idea that you were going to write a book when you went on this journey.
Never.
And this was 14 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to take this journey? You had this idea that you'd go around the world and do what?
Well, that's just it. I have a best friend in Australia, and she suggested it, and her childhood best friend, who is mentioned in the book, actually was doing it and went around the world and came, and when she arrived in Denver,
That's where you were living at the time?
At the time. She asked if she could stay with me, and I had no problem with it. And she told me about her stories of, and fears and everything that was happening. And so I always had that little seed in my mind. So when my best friend in Australia said, hey, why don't you do what Boot did and go for it, and you can start here on the caveat that I had a place to stay and I had a job. So
Yeah,
leaving,
so she offered that to you.
correct.
Yeah.
So leaving the country with $368 in my pocket, it wasn't the ignorance of, well, I'm going to do it anyway. It wasn't like that. It was more like, well, I have, opportunity elsewhere where I can make money and survive. So it's not a problem.
Yeah, but that wasn't really the case, was it?
It wasn't the case at all. In fact, it changed entirely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can only imagine what that would have been like. And I read the book, so I, imagine part of what
Thank
that
you.
was like to go there, assuming you're going to have, in a foreign country so far away from your support system, and just trusting that this person who was your best friend, as you call her, was going to provide you with shelter and a job, and that didn't happen.
I got to.
What was that like for you?
It was very scary. It
Yeah.
was extremely nerve-wracking, and I didn't know what to do. There were moments when I thought of panhandling, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. But there were moments where I was overwrought with fear of what to do, and that pretty much set the course of what the rest of the next 6 months would have been or would be. And it was really gathering all my wits and getting through the fear. Which is a universal truth that I believe everyone experiences.
Yeah, you don't have to travel abroad to be digging and scratching to
Not at
wonder where
all.
your next meal's coming from.
Not at all, right? I mean, we could open the door and talk to some people.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I know on the road to find out, you found that title to be a compelling title because it's, as it turns out, you were on the road to find out. And I'm curious, what were some of the things you found out?
Oh, well, some universal truths is, a broken heart leads the way to, or stimulates growth, development, and change. Humor is the best ally throughout life, and there was a lot of that. Thank goodness. A
lot of debauchery too, as I recall
in
from
the beginning
parts of the book. Yeah.
Definitely. Smiling was a lifesaver, actually, in many regards. And what a smile, it's so simple, and a lot of the concepts are exactly that. They're very simple concepts that we might overwork in our minds. But really, a smile, you don't know what that can do for somebody walking down the street. Because you don't know what that person has experienced that day or the day before. And just the simple gesture of sharing that smile can give somebody a light of hope.
And another trick that you used, at least I remember this from when you actually came back to the U.S. You were in New York, and you were on a subway with a couple of pretty scary guys. Tell me a little bit about how you handled that situation.
That was actually a wonderful experience because at this point I was pretty calloused by the road, and I felt I could handle anything at that point because I had gone through so much. And they didn't scare me, but I had to, and I had gone into this this level inside myself that I had never achieved before of consciousness that I could relate to people on a level that went beyond words. And when I sat across from these two guys, they looked like they could slice my throat at any second. And, but I was beyond that. I was so beyond fear at that point that I utilized the concepts and the realities of love that were in my mind and in my heart, that I would, at this point, I would just stare at people, right between the eyes, and I would literally just blast them with thoughts of positive love and higher vibration. And I think it's a tool that any of us can do, but we don't, and we're not taught to. But our minds are very powerful, and somehow there was an energy transference between me and these two guys where it again went to humor, and we shared a fabulous exchange, and it was my first exchange of any energy in New York. And when that happened, it really set me off in a wonderful new expansion of awareness and acceptance of what was happening in New York, which is a scary place. It can be, anyway. So it was just an amazing thing.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is you looked at them between the eyes, and you said you blasted them with universal light or power or
like
love.
a pure positive conscious thought.
Yeah, it was an actual thought.
Yes. Yes.
Did it, when you did that, did you notice any change in them right away? I noticed that their behavior changed.
Their behavior changed.
Yeah.
And it's like energy follows thought. Using that concept, that's where I was operating from. So if I had control over my energy and my thought, the hope, as with any, was, that there would be a stimulation of energy in response. And that's exactly what happened.
And so you needed to use that tool quite a bit during your journeys, I
had
imagine.
to, yeah. But I learned to. And it really was a manipulation of energy in a very positive way.
Now, early on in the book, and there are many positive things that happened for you, and I don't want to really dwell on the negative, but early on in the book, I think you had just arrived in Greece, and you were basically accosted by a guy. And I remember you said your editor kind of wanted you to just I don't think you really need that in there. I mean...
It was removed from the book.
Yeah, and
it was was removed from the book, actually.
That's right. We could talk a little bit about that, too. But it was really important for you to keep in that book that very typical story where a woman traveling alone gets accosted by a man. And so why was that so important for you to keep that in there?
It was important because it's a reality. And sometimes realities are hard to talk about and even harder to hear. And I know that there's going to be people, and I know that people are feeling it right now that are involved in this book that are probably wrestling with some feelings and emotions that this book has brought up. But that doesn't stop a person from following through with the intent. And that's really it. It's all about the intent of what the book is trying to deliver. But that moment, it bummed me out that somebody would take advantage of a situation and for their own advantage, of course. And it put me in a really bad space that this was a reality. And then what was funny queer, was that it kept happening. Then there was another, within the same day, there was another man
That's right.
I wouldn't say accosted me, but definitely went over the line. So it was, and I think a lot of women deal with this issue on a daily basis, and a lot of men don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable for them because not all men are like that. And that's the shame is, people are people no matter what, male or female. It's a shame that there's a few bad apples in any gender that ruin, a respect level and just the whole gender ID. It's kind of tainted by these bad apples,
They're just bad people, they're not bad men.
Correct. Yeah. And that's a big, that is something I definitely wanted to get through. I am gay, and this book comes from that, that perspective.
Yeah.
But it's not that I don't like men
right.
by any means whatsoever.
No, you had some very wonderful relationships in the book with
Extremely.
men. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful men in my life. Yeah. And but there are those bad apples that it's, it's like, hey, man, you rise up.
Yeah.
Enough of this nonsense of... Yeah, man up.
Yeah,
man
really.
up in a real strong way.
Right.
And the strongest way, I think, is very much through the heart and not ruled by the ego and the mind.
Well, I think it's important to have it in there too. I think any woman wanting to travel alone like you did should read this book, because you're going to be faced with some of the hardest things you have to deal with when you're traveling alone, you have faced. And I think most people traveling alone run into that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt it. I'd be prepared for it.
Yeah. Now, let's talk, before we go on, I want to let our listeners know, if you've just tuned in, you're listening to KMUZ, which is your community radio station here in the Mid-Valley at 88.5 FM. And my guest today is Jamie Sloan, who also happens to be a program host here at KMUZ. So I'm very proud to have another sister on the show with me.
Thank you.
And we're talking about a book she just published just last week called On the Road to Find Out, about her travels around the world. You went to 4 different countries. Why don't you tell us about the countries, and then I have some questions about it.
Sure. I mean, it's a pretty open statement or question. Australia is so much like America. It's kind of nauseating. But at the same time, they've, on a social level, they've taken an American idea of freedom and made it better, because Australians, in fact, do take care of their own in a very concrete way. And whether, like drugs and alcohol, such a huge issue. Mm-hmm. And but they're on the front lines in dealing with the issue. And it's not enabling the issue, but if you're going to make these choices as a society, they want their own people to know that there's help. So you go to most public restrooms in Australia, and there are needle bins. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're going to do this, we want you to stay alive and we want you to make better choices, but at the same time, take care of yourself as best you can and the people around you. So leaving needles, on the street kind of thing, people can actually, go to a public restroom, do their dirty business, but dispose of these needles in a proper way where it's not hurting another person.
Right,
so
right.
There's all these little things
Mm-hmm.
that they do as a society that is pretty amazing. Nepal, third world country, I'm sure it's a lot different now. A lot of things have changed on a political level for Nepal, especially for the women. And but beautiful people, beautiful people. Very much simple ways of life. Very hard to complain about your own life when you experience a life like that, in an environment like that is so rough and rugged in so many ways.
I want to stop you there for a moment, because your trip, the Nepal trip, where you decide to go on a trek, and you weren't really quite prepared for trekking in the way.
Yeah, I didn't know what a trek was.
It was very. There's very similarities to Cheryl Strayed in Wild. Very similar situation where a person goes hiking in the mountains totally unprepared. You had leather boots that were eating away your feet. Mm-hmm. You had a backpack that was way too heavy. Mm-hmm. But you made it through.
I had all the odds against me.
You did, but you made it through.
I did make it.
Yeah.
Barely.
So I'm I was pretty impressed having read through that. I was aching for you.
Yeah, hubris is a very powerful human thing, and I have a lot of hubris, and it's about learning from that, and in that aspect, I definitely did.
Yep. And then you went to Greece.
And Greece was phenomenal. I mean, as far as experiencing a whole different culture, that phrase, "it's Greek to me," is so applicable. I mean, the language is not phonetically near English by any means. Even the written language is, you can't decipher anything unless you know the language. So it was very debilitating going to Greece without the ability to read or communicate with anyone. But at the same time, again, anywhere, another universal truth is that the people of any given country are very proud of their country for the most part. But when they can share that pride, like, this tree over here, my grandfather planted this tree. These little stories, it gets you on a connection with people where really we all have a connection of sameness, however being different. And that was a very common thing to hear on the road was same, but different.
Right, and that term namaste, isn't
Namaste.
that about I see you and me and you see me and you?
Yeah, I honor the God within you. And in Lakesh Alakin is I am another you. And that is a resonating truth globally. And I experience that constantly.
Yeah, and what we're talking about right now, that finding the differences and the commonalities within us, I think you have a paragraph in your book that you were going to read. Doesn't that kind of address that? That might be a nice, we're going to take just a brief moment, and I'm going to have Jamie read from her book. Why don't you give a little bit of a context of what you're going to read, and then read that paragraph.
Okay, this is actually in Australia. And this is when things started to get real. And the fear was there. But there was also this reality of, I got to go beyond it. So how am I going to do that? And where is my inspiration to do that and get me out of the stagnation of fear? This particular song title, and if the listeners don't know, every chapter of the book is highlighted by a song name or a title of a song. So this song is called The Source. This chapter is called The Source. As she peered out into the crystal blue depths of Gaia, she could see some sea creatures suspended in the wake, floating in liquid space. Jellyfish with tentacles 15 to 20 feet in length dangled weightlessly in the opalescent aquatic stratosphere. She stood mesmerized by the incredible beauty of the underwater world. Her worldly worries and thoughts left her as she stared at the natural occurrence. Wonder took over her mind without resistance. She began to question the role of these creatures play here. In her ignorance as to their purpose, she stood in the same ignorance within herself. She thought, what purpose do I have or share in this life? My heart speaks loudest for the need of connection to that which I deem as the ultimate wisdom and experience in life, that of love.
Yeah, can't argue with that. One of the things that really strikes me in your book is about music and food, and how you love them both, and it's a big part of both the experience and the book, because in the book, like you said, all the chapters are named after titles of music. So how did you know so much about music?
Well, I started DJing in 1988 on the radio at a college radio station. And the food part is, I was born and raised in New Orleans, so I'm kind of a foodie by birthright.
That's fair enough.
And but going back to the music, as I mentioned in the book, I'm a song collector. And I've had this obsession of collecting song tracks and that experience of another person's work that is, the catharsis of their feelings and experiences through a piece of musical work, not only musical but verbal as well. And I just have such admiration for those that have that ability, because the number one, I'm going to say it, I'm going to put it out there in the world, but the number one thing on my bucket list, the very top thing before I die, is I would love to know how to fluently play an instrument. That's the number one. In particular, the violin.
Oh, violin, because in the book you had a didgeridoo with you.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk any more about that, or do you want to continue with the other music conversations?
I don't know how much there is to talk about it. I still have her. And
music, I think,
music
is her name.
Reminisce of another song, and yeah, she's beautiful, and
you still have her.
I still have her, and I played her recently, actually, but I have not mastered the circular breathing technique, which makes it what it is.
Okay, so we won't be hearing you play didgeridoo at your book reading.
I toyed with
Saturday.
It for a while,
Did
but
you?
I don't think so.
I do want to. We're going to say this again, but I want to let our listeners know that you can meet Jamie in person on Saturday. Tell us more about the book signing event.
That's correct. It's at Christo's Pizzeria down on Broadway, from 5 to 7 p.m. It should be fun. We're going to have some cocktails called the Sloan Ranger.
I'll be there.
I actually made a soundtrack for the book.
Wow.
That the first 20 people will get the soundtrack with the book. It's free, so there's no copyright infringements or anything like that. It's just, it goes hand in hand with the book, and it's just an added little swag, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
We'll have bookmarks and just things like that, and do a little book reading and then the signing, and we get to feast on Christo's wonderful food, and which, yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. So that's this Saturday at Christo's in Salem, just north of downtown on Broadway. I think it's 1100 something Broadway.
Yeah, 1180
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Anyway, people can find us. So good. So you'll be there, and you won't be playing your didgeridoo, but maybe. Why don't you bring her though? I would love to see music.
Sure, I can bring her.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been talking about your love of music and food, and how you combine them. Just to remind our listeners that you do have a program called The Delicious Dish Fridays from noon to 2 here on KMUZ. And what is that about?
Well, as a wise person once said, if you do anything in life, do it with passion. And I don't have a short amount of that, that's for certain. So loving DJing and music, having the opportunity to bring it all together in a community radio format, because I was offered a position with Clear Channel.
Oh, really?
Once upon a time, and I turned it down. Yeah. And because of how the interview went, I was a sure shot, and it went to a level that blew me away, of just the arrogance and audacity of what was representing Clear Channel at the time. And I just knew in my soul I could never work for that corporation ever in my life. And so the thought of going to commercial radio just dissolved. And I had no desire. It was soulless. You know, it's a button pusher that plays whatever is demanded, you know, for ratings. And, you know, everything has its place, and that's good for them, and, you know, they make their money. But community radio was given is an opportunity, and thank you very much, that allowed me more freedom of expression, because my shows typically tell a story. They're made by design, and it takes me a minimum of 12 hours a week to prepare for a show. And food and music, you know, being my two favorite passions, I thought it just was a wonderful platform to bring them together and share with people. And some weeks are absolutely better than others. It depends on what happened during the week. But, you know, it's you know how it is. It's like, it's, again, one of those catharsis where, cathartic platforms where you get to express yourself. And that's The Delicious Dish.
Yeah, all right. And it's a good show. I actually like the promo, too.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. And you play a lot, and you play, yeah, and you play a lot of Kate Bush.
Kate Bush is the grande dame of the dish. I play her at the end of every show.
Yeah.
And that just kind of happened, but I'm so glad it happened.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Hey, let's go back to the book a little bit, because I have to admit I wasn't able to finish the book in time. I've been reading it on a computer, and my eyes are like, oh, really?
Right.
So I'm so glad to see the paperback here in front of me today.
Me too.
It's beautiful.
And
Beautiful
that's
cover.
just it. It's the people that have it on ebook. I kind of cringe, because I'm like, it's just not the same.
No, I love holding the book. I love the picture. The cover's beautiful.
Right. Thank you. But that's just it. If I wish people would get the paperback and have the experience, you know. Some people just, you know.
How can they get it if they can't make it to the book signing? JamieSloan.com?
Correct. JamieSloan.
Now, in the book is about you, I mean, obviously, and it's written in third person.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
I didn't do that.
Okay.
In fact, there's a couple of typos that I found in the book.
Or it says she, I, or something like that.
Yes, and it really bummed me out. But that just goes to show what this process has been. And I wrote it.
It's not perfect, is it?
No, but that's
the perfectness of it.
Exactly. And such is life, right? But when I wrote the book, at the end of where I was just like, I had to know when to stop. That was the hardest part of writing this book, is knowing when to stop. And it was almost 600 pages in first person. And I have a wonderful editor that took on the dubious task of condensing that in a readable format for, you know, the average layperson to, you know, take interest and change it into third person. So needless to say, there's a lot of sub-stories missing that I felt were important. But at the same time, again, you have to know when to quit. And when too much is too much. And having a wonderful editor, Miss Linda Lindholm, she saw through that and did, I think, a fabulous job of taking it to the point of where it is today.
Yeah, you need a third a person who is not emotionally involved in the book.
Right.
Because you're right, you can only see this book through your perspective, but
Right.
she's trying to see it through the eyes of many readers.
Yeah, she made it more of a story format, where for me it was very linear, like this happened and that happened and this happened and that
Like
happened.
a diary.
Yeah, and a lot of dialogue was removed as well. But at the same time, I'm pleased with the end result. But I do, in the back of my mind, have this hopeful wish that someday there'll be another edition where the meat and potatoes, all the meat and potatoes are in there.
Yeah. No, I can see, just from reading the book, I can see, well, from this story, there's like a whole nother book in this story.
And there, yes.
Yeah.
There's a few.
So you have a trilogy. But, you know, in the book, like I said, I know you as Jamie, but the character in the book who is you is named Jazz.
Correct.
So where does that come from?
Actually, that is a pen name that I adopted when I was 16 years old. And I wrote a lot of poetry back in those days, and everything I signed was Jazz. And then I got my first email, I believe, at the end of 1998, and it was DJ Jazz Sloan. And I've always had that handle. So, and that was another part of you know, the writing of the book is I was told it has to be in third person, and I was like, well, I'm not going to say Jamie. So, you know, I just went with my pen name.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I actually like that name. I thought maybe because you're from New Orleans and that's where the pen name came from.
And yes, there's definitely that added background to that. Sure.
Now, unfortunately, because I didn't get to finish the book, the fourth country that you went to, completely different than the other three, was Ireland. And why there?
I was on a mission, don't you know?
Yeah.
I was off to find Sloane's castle.
Yeah. And I'm dying to find out if you ever found Sloane's castle.
I'm dying for you to read it and find out.
Okay. I guess the suspense will just have to hang there with both me and my listeners out there. They'll have to get the book to find out. Now, Sloan, there was a family. Sloan is your last name, so it's a family name. And so obviously you have some Irish background in your blood.
I do. Scotch, Irish, and French. And there's, you know, as most Southern white people say, there's definitely some Native American in there as well, Cherokee. So, yeah, I'm a mutt like most of us.
Yeah. All right, so then the journey is over. What made you decide to come back? Was there a time frame you had in mind, or you ran out of money and were tired
Ran out of money, and I really got tired.
I can
really
only imagine.
Exhausted. And, you know, every day was the unknown.
Right.
And so
There's only so much of that you can take.
Yeah, without proper preparation, there's only so much you can continue. And because I could have gone for another 6 months, like within the parameters of the ticket.
Oh, that's right.
Because it's open for a year. And but I ran out of steam.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to come back.
Yeah, 6 months you were on the road, right? So what it was like for you after being and traveling, let's see, you were to Australia, then to Nepal, Greece, and then Ireland. What was it like to come back to the States?
It was definitely different. I changed a lot. My perspective changed very much, and I just looked at the country different. I looked at the politics different. I looked at the people different, society different. And at this point, I felt like an outsider for the first time in my own country.
Mm-hmm.
And by the mentality, the overruling mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this country very much, but there are obviously a lot of changes that need to happen for it to function
Sustainably?
Sustainably, exactly.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have that perspective when they come from traveling abroad.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would hope so. And but I was excited to be back, but again, it was, with that wild-eyed hope that maybe I could do something to change it to a better place to be and to grow into.
Mm-hmm. And then you went back to New Orleans to visit your dad. Now, you hadn't been living in New Orleans for a long time, right?
Yeah, I left when I was 15.
You left when you were 15. You went on your journey at age 27. So you hadn't lived in New Orleans for that many years. And then you go back and you see your dad for the first time in a long time. What was that like?
It was great to see him. He had changed. And I had visited over the years,
Sure.
Christmas and Thanksgiving and whatnot. And it was really good to see him. And he always wanted to travel. That was a really big thing for him. So he lived vicariously through me. And he looked forward to my postcards and my letters more than anyone, I think, out there. Because I was his baby, doing what he always wanted to do. So I gave him that glimpse of life on the other side of what we knew, being from New Orleans.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier about your love of food and music. What would you say was where did you get the best food?
The best food was a homemade meal in Greece from this mother that in the book, she's Mama, because that's what everybody called her. And she was the most adorable woman, just, amazing and all heart, nothing to hold back. She made me one of her own in an instant before I even met her. And she cooked me this meal on a very busy day for her. It was her son's wedding. But she made me a full course meal and beyond before she left for the wedding.
Huh.
And it was one of the best meals I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, I don't know the real term. She was from Italy, actually, and but she lived a lot of her life in Greece. But she had that Italian flair in her food that was just
To die for.
To die for.
Right.
And it was a combination of what we call in New Orleans red gravy and elephant beans, which are a big white bean. But the texture was on point. The flavor of the sauce with the fresh herbs, fresh baked bread, a whole bottle of Chianti, a nice fresh salad. It just went on, and real Parmigiano Reggiano. It was the deal.
It was the real deal.
The real deal.
Well, when you mentioned I think you said elephant beans, it reminded me one of the key things that I wanted to talk about, and now we only have minutes left. We don't have enough time, so hopefully we'll talk about it at the book release. Was about one of the things you wanted to do and you accomplished was ride on an elephant,
and it was the worst experience I ever had.
Right. And thus, part of your proceeds are going to be going to the elephant sanctuary, right?
In Tennessee, yes.
Right. Well, we don't have time to tell that story, so I hope our listeners come down to your book signing and release this Saturday at Christo's from 5 to 7. Hear about the elephant story being the worst experience of your life and why we're developing proceeds to go to that organization. Thank you, Jamie Sloan, for
You're
being
welcome.
a part of my show. I'm honored to have another sister DJ on my show, Melanie in the Morning. And I wish you the best of luck with your book. And thank you. And apparently a lot of people, Mark checked online, there's a lot of people all over the world listening to this. I'm very happy about
wonderful.
that.
Thank you
so if you
so
want to give a
much.
shout out to anybody listening, that's fine. You've got your moment.
Shout out to everyone listening. Thank you so much for your support, and spread the word. If you can share it on Facebook, that would be wonderful. can go to my website, jamiesloan.com, and leave me a message, and I will get you a signed copy if that's what you prefer. And if anything, just share a good book.
Yeah,
And thank you very much.
Yeah. And thanks to all the listeners for tuning into Melanie in the Morning this morning. You can always let me know how you feel about my show in general at my Facebook page, which is Melanie in the Morning. That's facebook.com/Melanie in the Morning. And these talk shows that we have are also program archived on our website, so you can always go back and listen again. And before we go out, I want to let you know that we're going to play us another song by Cat Stevens called Kathmandu. Jamie has one more thing to say.
I do have one more thing to say. With all of my heart, I just want to thank Max Marbles for publishing the book and Linda Lindholm for editing.
Yes, and that is, he provides a service,
Glue Pot Press
provides a service for anyone who wants to self-publish their book, and we didn't get into that today, but we'll find out more about that at the book signing.
Yes, for sure.
So if you are an author needing to publish your work, wanting to do it self-publishing, Glue Pot Press is the place to check out.
Yeah, Max Marbles, wonderful man.
Yep, thank you. So I also want to let you know about a fundraiser for KMUZ that's coming up on Sunday, and Mark is going to plug something in. That's a real fun way to learn about it. And then we're going to end our show with a song by Cat Stevens, Kathmandu. Thank you.